why someone would even want to switch from vendor to seller. What is happening to vendor that it's not as um, successful anymore? I feel like at once a point it was like super exclusive. Like everybody wants to be on vendor. Everyone wants Amazon to sell their products. Like what happened recently that is really kind of killing vendor?
Yeah, so if you are currently selling on Vendor Central, a lot of times you'll see over time that your sales will plateau and they're not growing at an increment that year over year. The growth starts to slow down. Another issue that we see on Vendor Central is that new product introductions are really difficult. And so you'll often have to use a born to run or, maybe use a 3P strategy or a seller central strategy to get Vendor Central to even order initially those new products. Vendor Central is known to kind of cherry pick the assortment. And so if you have a large assortment of ASINs, in most cases, Vendor Central is not going to order your entire catalog. And so sometimes colors are not represented or sizes might not be represented on variations. And the overall customer experience can really be, not the best because you're not representing your product in the best way. Another issue that we're seeing recently is that Vendor Central is not accepting cost increases. So if you have an increase in raw materials or just production costs are going up, Vendor Central has had a hard line on accepting any cost increases, which is putting a lot of margin pressure on manufacturers right now. And then another thing that we're seeing is another situation is that excessive amount of chargebacks. And so chargebacks can be for a wide variety of reasons. And I think Eric was mentioning a situation about the chargebacks where it was based on the purchase orders. Eric, do you want to mention what you've been seeing?
Oh yeah, I've been seeing like just the purchase orders coming in, and the client is unable to fulfill those orders as soon as they come in. They come in on Sunday, they need to be fulfilled within like 48 hours and shipped out by Tuesday. And if they can't get that done, those chargebacks start coming in. So whether you have an issue with your warehouse, maybe you have another marketplace, maybe you made a hot deal with I don't know, Cabela's or I don't know, Target or whatever you got going on, and they need a big shipment out, so your warehouse staff is over there doing that, and this comes in. Now you suddenly are going to start getting those chargebacks, what Lisa's talking about, and some of those chargebacks, I've seen them into the thousands of dollars. It can add up quickly, and can really impact your cost.
Yeah, yeah. And one more big one, Pete, is that Vendor Central will not adhere to any MAP pricing, minimum advertised price. And what we see over time is that the retail can be driven down much, much lower than I think most manufacturers and retailers want to see their products being sold at. And it can complicate things off of Amazon as well. And so minimum advertised price is a big issue on Vendor Central as well.
I mean, that's a lot of just problems. It sounds like with vendor. Then Eric, like these don't happen on seller, right? This isn't the same thing. Like if I switch over to seller, it's not going to be the same issues, right? Like I can kind of do this easier.
Yeah, you do have there's opportunity there in seller to address most of these issues, right? Lisa brought up vendor might not order your new products. Well, you just send in your new products to Seller Central, right? Or you just flip them on
Yeah.
fulfilled by merchant, and you're off to the races. You're selling. Warehouse things. There's all of these can be resolved by making that shift over to Seller Central from Vendor Central, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. Great. So despite, all of this ease of access, quality of life improvements that seller seems to have over vendor, there's got to be some issues with it. Like Eric, what kind of issues do you see from, again, just in general from moving, but also like looking at seller versus vendor?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I mean, what really there's two main reasons why people move over. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but the two main ones are, hey, my cogs went up. I can't vendors not accepting my price increase. And I kind of want to have control of my brand a little bit. I want a little bit more control, a little bit more hands-on. And it just makes it a little bit easier on seller. You have to ask permission on vendor. Hey, can I get a price increase? And they'll say yes or no. And they most of the time they say, no. So moving into seller, and going through that spreadsheet where you're saying, hey, if I change my price to this, would I be more profitable? Well, the spreadsheet might say yes, but when you get into seller, don't be alarmed when you do increase your price immediately. Let's say you're going to increase it by 20%, 30%, whatever that number is. There's going to be potentially a high pricing error, which would then remove your offer display. And what that means is, historically, the price of this product has been X, and you've increased it to Y, and that Y price, Amazon system might think that's malicious, and so they're just trying to protect the customer. And so what you have to do is you can do it a couple of different ways. You can leave it as is for 90 days. It usually takes about 90 days, which I don't really necessarily advise. What I would do is I would bring it in. I'd maybe even start out at the vendor price and then just incrementally increase your pricing strategically, because there are, you also don't want to be like in September, right? And then just jack up your price right before fourth quarter if Amazon will let you, because then there's softwares out there like Honey. There's other softwares out there that consumer facing where they can see, or I think there's Camel. You can see where there's price increases. So you kind of want to be strategic about that. You might want to do a price increase maybe in January, maybe then in April or whatever. So then it kind of incrementally, it looks like it makes sense to the brand. It also makes it so it's, consistent with the brand. So the price, those reference prices that will trigger if you raise those prices just need a little bit of time to reset. And also if you're doing and then also be aware too, if you're going to do a price across your entire markets where you're going to raise your price on your website, and then your price on Amazon might go down because of off Amazon pricing. That could be a whole nother podcast, but I just want to make sure that, you just pay attention to when you make that flip, it's not instantly, hey, I'm going to switch my price to what I want it. You might have to go slow. And then it goes back to kind of what Lisa was saying too about, cash flow and just be strategic and move slow. Just a question for Lisa. What do you find is the average amount of time? And in your opinion, what's the smart amount of time to move from vendor to seller?
So typically, if you have a medium to large account, the data move over takes about 30 days. Even though you're just bringing over that ASIN, as I recommend, you need to bring over all of those details. And I often will refer to it as a mirror. So Seller Central and Vendor Central, the data should mirror each other. You don't want to bring over a listing into Seller Central and leave that back end empty, because eventually the contribution will go to the Seller Central account and that ASIN, and then you've left it blank. So we want to just make sure that we're mirroring our data on both sides. And then if the account is large, like if they have several thousand ASINs, I really recommend a six-month minimum approach, and sometimes even a year, depending on the volume of the ASINs that are involved. You definitely want to be thoughtful and make sure that your top ASINs that are running thousands and thousands of units every single week are not affected in a negative way. And so that's why sometimes we move those last. But if you have a small amount of ASINs, it really can be done, I think, safely in 60 to 90 days. But if you have a large catalog, we do recommend that phased approach. Six months is our average, but it could be longer.